Hey, everybody. Um, I am so excited to see all of y'all here today. We had about 97 people register for this town hall tonight, which is really, really exciting to know that there's such a beautiful community here in Louisiana. So I guess I should probably introduce myself a little bit. My name is Anaya. My pronouns are she or they, and I wear a lot of different hats. But for tonight, I'll just be kind of facilitating and hosting tonight's town hall. So we have a lot of beautiful speakers and a lot of really important information to get through tonight. Um, but we are going to start off with a little bit of joy. We know that this year and the past couple years have been really hard for queer and trans people here in Louisiana and all over the country, especially in the Deep South. And so we want to make sure that in the midst of what feels devastating and awful, that we're also taking a minute to celebrate our wins and to really lead with joy and support and community, because we know that those are the only ways that we're going to get out of what we're in right now. Um, so I should get a couple things out of the way before we dive right into it. I know that the Saints are playing tonight, but when we were scheduling this town hall, it was either tonight or next week, the day before the Beyonce concert. So now you know what our priorities are as a coalition. We were not about to get ahead of the Queen. So we sacrificed our saints instead. But yeah, moving on from that probably corny joke, I just kind of want to do a bit of like foundational work to talk a little bit about what LocALL is. So we are a statewide organizing and policy and legislative coalition that's solely dedicated to LGBTQ plus rights and justice here in Louisiana. We are a hardworking group of folks, and we've been around for a couple of years now. So, since our inception in 2021, we have a couple of different wins under our belt. So, first, that year, we defeated all of the anti LGBTQ legislation that was introduced during the 2021 legislative session and the 2021 veto override session. And in 2022, we defeated all but one of the anti LGBTQ plus bills. So, in addition to those policy wins, we also, for the past couple of years, we've planned and hosted a very large gathering of LGBTQ plus people and allies during legislative session, just because we want a seat at the table and we want our elected officials to know who we are and what we stand for. So we've been doing that for a couple years. And I think it's also really important to acknowledge that LocALL is just the latest iteration of queer and trans and allied people in Louisiana that have been doing this work. We have a lot of different coalitions that have kind of laid the path for us. And so we're really happy to just kind of walk in their steps. So, our membership, some of us belong to organizations, some of us are advocates, organizers, healers, storytellers, medical professionals, attorneys, or just everyday people who know that queer and trans people have always been in this state. And we're determined to fight for equity and dignity. So that's a little bit about us. and who we are. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about community agreements and just some tips and logistics. So, first off, this is streaming on multiple public pages. And so we just feel like it's really important for everyone to use a little bit of discretion on what you say. And that's particularly for our speakers and our presenters, and also for y'all who are watching this. Maybe think about what you comment, because, like I said, this is on multiple public social media pages. And a lot of times, if you're looking at it from your phone or your laptop, you're probably already linked in your profile. And so, if you want to leave a comment, your profile name will come up next to your comment. So, we wanted to really make sure that all of our town halls and events are accessible so that we can build community. So that's why it's on a lot of different public pages so that people can have access to this information. Um, and we also recognize that we're talking about really deeply personal things. So, with that in mind, if you have a question or a comment and you'd rather not have your name or profile name publicly appear, because like I said, it will, you can email hello@forumforequality.org, and we will still get your questions, um, but we won't reveal who asked the question whenever we're sharing the answer here. So, yeah, I'm gonna hopefully someone can put that email address in the chat so people can refer back to it um, if they need it. So, housekeeping's out of the way, thank God. um, we are going to dive into some of the different bills from this particular legislative session. We're going to start out with the ones that were successful, the ones that we either, were able to kill, or the ones that did advance that were actually good. Just if it was good for queer and trans people during legislative session, we're going to talk about it first. And from there, we're going to move into talking about the healthcare ban bill, and then sharing resources, and hopefully there'll be some time for Q&A. So that's a little bit about what we're doing tonight. So I think our first speaker, if he's ready, is Britton Forsyth. Hey, Britton.
Hi. Hey y'all, I'm Britton. My pronouns are he, they. I'm the legislative coordinator for Step Up Louisiana. I'm going to talk a little bit about Don't Say Gay and the Dead Name Bill. I feel very grateful. I have actually forgotten the bill numbers for these. I think Don't Say Gay is HB 466, if I'm remembering correctly. But these two bills have significant overlap. So the Dead Name Bill was presented by Raymond Cruz, and then Don't Say Gay was presented by Dodie Horton. And the big overlap here was that both of them prohibited the use of pronouns that deviate at all from what is on someone's birth certificate, or a name that deviates from what is on someone's birth certificate unless it's a derivative of that name. Um, there's a piece in them that say you can depart from this if you have written parental consent, but then there's another follow-up that says that a teacher or student has basically religious exemption to not go along with the written parental consent. So it kind of cancels out to be able to use religious exemption for it. Don't Say Gay also covered discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity in the classroom, any extracurricular activities, and then any event that was sponsored by the school in any way. It prohibited school employees from being able to talk to students about that. Um, the other thing about Don't Say Gay in particular, both of these bills, but Don't Say Gay in particular, is that it's written pretty vaguely, which is pretty dangerous. So there was a lot of um, there was a lot of talking points from sort of the more conservative side that this bill allows a lot of things to happen. It lets a kid talk to a teacher outside of the classroom, but as per usual, if a child is to talk to a teacher outside of the classroom about gender identity or sexual orientation, they again need written permission from their parent, which we know is often very dangerous for kids. So both of these bills passed out of the House and Senate, and they went to the governor's desk, and he vetoed them. And then we went into a veto session. Obviously, a lot of us know what happened in that veto session, but these two did not survive the veto session. They were not overridden. So both of these bills were successfully vetoed, which is um, really due to a lot of the hard work from some of the people that are going to talk on this call and the whole LocALL coalition. So I think that's all I have for those. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Britton. Thank you. I'm checking my phone now, and I don't see any questions that have come through about those two bills. Um, but yeah, I'm just very happy that they're dead. I know that's a
I'm very
very,
happy that they're dead.
I'm
Yeah.
very happy that they're dead. So cool. Thank you so much, Britton, again. And now we're going to transition to Amanda Jones, who is one of the hardest working people that I have ever met. Like, shout out to our librarians, y'all. Like, they have been through it. They are currently going through it, and they do not deserve it at all. And so Amanda is going to talk about what happened with libraries this session, because a lot of it, honestly, those bills had a lot of animus towards queer and trans people hiding underneath. So take it away, Amanda.
I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amanda Jones, and I am a school librarian in Livingston Parish. But I also am on the American Library Association Council. I am a voting member of the Council of the Executive Board of the American Library Association, and I am on the Executive Board of the Louisiana Library Association, and I'm the current past president of the Louisiana Association of School Librarians. So I wear many hats as well. And this was my very first legislative session to go and actually participate. And it was very eye opening to me. So, first, I'll talk about the wins because there were some wins. There were originally 4 library bills. And the first bill, HB 25, was defeated in committee, which that is a huge win because that bill would have allowed parish governing boards, whether it's a parish council or police jury, to fire the library board of control at will. Just fire them so that if a library board of control member was not voting in accordance to what the parish council wanted, they could be removed and replaced. And we've seen that in Livingston Parish where they weren't voting for the way they wanted, and one was removed. So that was a huge win. We are hearing news that is going to be coming back next year, so we're ready for that. Another big win was HB 102. It just kind of never was brought into it never came up in committee. I don't know how that works and why it didn't. I'm assuming because it had very, very close ties to SB 7, which did pass. One library bill that did pass was HB 628. It's not too much to worry about if you're not in Livingston Parish, which is my parish, and it was just to circumvent state law to allow 2 additional library board members to basically stack the board of control. But the big one that was passed, which was SB 7, it was signed into law. It is now called Act 436. Now, this law was based on the Protecting Innocence Project by Jeff Landry. It was introduced by, I believe, Heather Cloud. And it insinuates that there are sexually explicit materials in children's sections of libraries. And we know that is not the case. It has never been the case. Even the 10 books listed in the Protecting Innocence Project are adult books, maybe one young adult book. And most across the state are found in not the kindergarten section, which was stated in the legislature. It is they're mostly found in adult sections or in young adult teen sections of most libraries. Now, the area of concern in this bill that we have as librarians is that it's a very arbitrary definition of obscenity and sexually explicit materials. It's basically, it was not needed. We already have the Supreme Court case, Miller versus California, already requires the Miller test for, sexually explicit materials, obscenity in libraries. And so we're not ordering those books anyway. But what we're seeing with SB 7, or I'm sorry, now Act 436, is that in Louisiana now, if you are under the age of 18, all libraries will have a tiered library card system, which if you're 16 and 17 years old and you can get married in the state of Louisiana, you suddenly cannot check out certain books. So you can get married, but you cannot read about sexual reproduction. What we find with this bill is that the definitions leave a lot to be desired. Sexually explicit is not very well defined. They have a couple of buzzwords in there. But if you look at other books like biology, animal husbandry textbooks, sexual reproduction, that can fall under that and be even kids as 16 and 17 years old can't check those out. But the biggest concern for me would be the term community standards. So in this bill, it says community standards for populations served. It doesn't address what constitutes who decides a community standard. And if you're like my parish of Livingston, we've had parish councilmen state that rainbow books, which is the American Library Association's list of LGBTQ books that they recommend, he wants to eliminate the rainbow books. So this is very, very concerning to me. It's obviously, they say it's under the guise of sexually explicit materials, but we know that what this is going to do is target queer folks and Black, Indigenous people of color, and it's going to target them. So we're very worried about that. Now, what did happen? We've seen, for instance, in like Rapides and Livingston Parish, people are requesting that books be removed. Books like Pride Puppy, which is a picture book geared for 3 to 8-year-olds about a little puppy in a pride parade. And someone challenged that book and said it was sexually explicit. Not the case. So we all know what's happening with this law. Now it's concerning because thousands of books are going to have to be reviewed. And what else is concerning is that if the law, all libraries have to have the policy in place by January, and it must be implemented in June. And if libraries do not, if the parish governing boards do not agree with the decisions made by the Library Board of Control, they can withhold funding. So we're looking at a possible funding loss to our local public libraries. Now, it also covers not just books, but digital material. So you're talking about databases, you're talking about ebooks. All libraries already have reconsideration policies. So anyone in the community could have already challenged a book. This opens the door up to now, not only can they challenge it, but the ultimate decision comes down to the Library Board of Control. And if they decide that a book doesn't meet community standards, it can be banned from the library. Now, I will say, and I'll make sure to email this to everyone to disseminate. The state library did put out a 7-page report today on, I guess it's called the least resistance, on how you can minimally, make sure you're following the law, but to not go overboard with it, because we've seen in other states, Texas and Florida, they've had similar laws, and people go overboard in banning and censoring books because they don't want to break the law and lose funding. So we hope that's not going to happen. But I did want to say before I close out that if you need guidance on your local libraries, I would urge everyone to go to their local library board of controls and make sure you're paying attention to the meetings. Make sure that if it's very heavily books that are being objected and challenged are LGBTQIA plus books or BIPOC books, that you make a note of that and let us know. Especially let us know over at Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship, which I am also on the assistant director there. Let us know and we can find ways to help you. But the main thing is that libraries are there to serve all patrons, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, gender, religion, sexuality. Libraries are there to serve everyone. And so we're really going to be looking at this bill in the next year to make sure that they are not targeting our most marginalized, our most vulnerable communities. So attend those meetings and let us know. And I'm going to repeat that name, Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship. Let us know, we can help you. And thank you for letting me talk about the library bills.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Before we kind of go on to our next speaker, I just have like a couple of points that I want to make, particularly about the library bills. So a couple things are like coming up for me. So, there's this quote, I can't remember who said it, but basically the quote says that books are mirrors and windows. So books allow us to see and learn more about the world around us. And they also give us an opportunity to be, to see ourselves and to see ourselves represented, which is so important, especially if you come from a community that has not always had your fair share. And Amanda just told me that is Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. So Amanda coming through with the fire, as always. Another thing that popped up for me is, our libraries are going to be expected to implement this new act, but has anybody asked about if they're going to have the necessary funding to put this into place? Louisiana is not exactly known for properly funding its public institutions. So that's another question that I have. And also, too, like librarians, they already go through a crazy amount of training before they can officially call themselves a librarian. So, like, is this really necessary? I don't know about y'all, but I trust librarians to do their jobs. So, I'm going to get off my soapbox now and I'm going to transition to Deets, who has some really, really great information for us about what we can expect in the next couple months. So, Deets, take it away, boo.
Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with y'all on a Monday evening. I am not really a sports gay, but thank you to all of the sports gays and allies who are here instead of watching the Saints game. I'm really excited to be here and talk to y'all a little bit more about what my coalition is working on. So my name is Deets. I accept any pronoun used with respect, and I'm the statewide coordinator for the Louisiana Coalition on Criminalization in Health, or I'm going to call this LCCH from here on out. LCCH is focused on HIV decriminalization in the state of Louisiana. And I would say about 90% of the time that I say HIV criminalization, most people don't know what I'm talking about. And when I say this, I'm talking about people whose primary job is to serve people who are living with HIV, whether those be clinicians, whether those be case managers, whether those be lawyers even sometimes. And even people who are living with HIV are oftentimes pretty confused about what the laws that we have in our state right now actually mean. So before I dig into what we're going to do for where LCCH is trying to do legislatively to address these laws, I want to give us just like a little bit of couching and make sure that we're all up to date and we know what we're talking about when I use some of the language about the law that we're addressing with LCCH. So in 1989, our law started, right? And this was at a time when we really didn't understand HIV very well as a virus. Sounds familiar probably from, what we're thinking about with recent COVID exposure. Like we weren't really sure how the virus was transmitted. There was really not effective treatment at that time. And there was a lot of fear that was around HIV transmission. What we now know is that HIV is transmitted via sex or through needles that are shared amongst people. There are really not as many ways that we used to be scared that HIV could be transmitted, like biting or spitting or just being around somebody. But our laws were created when we were unsure. And then as science moved forward, as we figured out how HIV was transmitted, as we came up with better medications that were easier for people to take, so that most of the time these days, people who are living with HIV only have to take 1 or sometimes 2 pills a day in order to live really well. HIV is a chronically manageable disease these days, which is extraordinary. This is a big deal for people who are living with HIV and those of us who aren't. It helps keep all of us safer. And now we know that when people are on HIV medications and they take them every single day, they can reduce the amount of HIV that's in their system down to a level that is so low that it is scientifically impossible to pass HIV or to transmit HIV to another person. We call this undetectable equals untransmittable. If you have an undetectable viral load, if there's so little of it in your system that our tests can't find it, it is untransmittable to another person. Life-altering. Y'all, this is like huge science that most of us didn't get access to. Some of us might have heard U equals U in the past, but most of us don't really understand what this means for us functionally and how liberating this was for people who are living with HIV to not have to live in fear that potentially they could transmit the virus that they were living to somebody else. This was a big deal. Our laws didn't catch up, right? So our laws right now in Louisiana say that somebody who's living with HIV must disclose their HIV status to anybody who they might expose to the virus, whether or not that means of exposure is a way that can actually transmit the virus, and whether or not it's scientifically possible for that person to transmit the virus because they may be undetectable. So I'm going to give a story, and then I'm going to get into what we're doing. So let's think about someone who's living with HIV. They're undetectable, so they can't pass the virus on to anybody else. They get on Grindr, and they see that someone's got in their Grindr profile that they're on PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. This person is taking medication, or they say that they are, every day so that they cannot contract HIV. This is new science that's also really exciting that's not reflected in the law. So let's imagine these people go on a date. Let's imagine the person who says they're on PrEP actually has some pretty crummy things to say about people who are living with HIV. Let's say that the person who's living with HIV doesn't disclose their status, but also doesn't decide to have sex with that person because that person had some pretty crummy attitudes about people who are living with HIV. Now let's fast forward a couple of weeks. Let's say that the person who is on PrEP finds out that that other person was living with HIV. By this law, that person could criminalize the first person who did not disclose their status, even though transmission was impossible and even though they never had sex. And when someone catches charges behind this law, it is a mandatory prison time with a felony statute or the felony charge that includes a 15-year registry on the sexual offender registry. So when this sounds extreme, when this sounds like maybe that doesn't happen that often, maybe this is a law that is still just kind of living in the 80s, even in terms of prosecution, what we know is that to this day, we are continually hearing that people throughout the state of Louisiana are being criminalized by this law, impacted by this law, almost exclusively when no transmission has occurred and when no negative intent was actually there. So what we're trying to do with LCCH is change these laws so that they're in closer alignment with modern science and so that they're less able to be used coercively against people who are living with HIV in their day-to-day lives, whether that be through discrimination in an employment setting, whether that be through discrimination or violence in a romantic relationship. We want to change these laws. But this last session was a brutal one. Y'all were there. This session was really, really hard. And when our coalition was deciding whether or not we were going to move forward with actually just trying to fix the law right away, we were thinking about everything that I just told you about and realized that our legislators don't understand any of that either. And we were advised that we should slow down and try and inform the legislation a little bit more about where we are with modern understandings of HIV, and also to uplift the voices of people who are living with HIV to talk about how these laws impact them, even if they never touch a courtroom. So we decided to, we paired up with Representative Amy Freeman and Mandy Landry to successfully pass HR 130, which is going to look into all of these things. So right now we are actively working within the task force that was developed to be a part of this study to go throughout the entire state. We're going to all 9 health regions to host focus groups that are focused on people who are living with HIV to share their experiences of how cops have used these kinds of laws as tools of intimidation, talk about really how these laws impact them. And we're also partnering with local community social justice organizations throughout the state to host community education events. I would dig way further deeper than I'm going to in this 5 minutes I have with y'all about the impacts of these laws that are not always as immediately evident. And then we can ask community, now that you understand the law better, do you think it's just? Do you think it needs to be updated? Do you think that it's fair? We want to try and bring all of this information along with a really deep data dive to the legislation with the hopes that with a little bit more information that we might be able to be more successful in introducing true reform legislation next year. So we want to try, in our best case scenario, we want to see this law totally gone. We are very much prepared for incremental change, but we want and need your voices at the table. Just like with all of these issues, we can't move unless we move with you. And that includes bringing your concerns to the table too. That includes thinking about the things that we might not just want to charge forward with. So we would love to participate with you. I'm going to have Anaya put it in the chat that our coalition meets every second Wednesday of the month at 11 o'clock. You can sign up for our listserv at www.lacch.org. You can follow us on Instagram at Stigma Isn't Justice LA, because stigma is not justice. And you can email me directly if you're interested in having me come talk about the law, or find out more about what we're doing with HR 130 at coordinator@lacch.org. And that's the speed date for HR 130 and LCCH. I am so grateful for this time and for all of y'all's solidarity. Can't wait to hear more from everybody else.
Thank you so much, Deets. We did get a question, though, for you. People want to know, what does the shirt say?
This is what an HIV advocate looks like.
Love that. Yes. Thank you so much, Deets. And of course, Deets took it home for us, but I don't think I need to mention how criminalization of LGBTQ plus people is a problem in this state. So that makes the work that Deets and so many other advocates are doing that much more important. And I also, we're going to kind of try and gently transition into a little bit of the heavier stuff now. But before we do that, a James Baldwin quote, it sits with me all the time when I think about the type of work that I do, along with so many other amazing folks in our coalition. And basically what he said is that one of the reasons that people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense that once the hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with their pain. And I think that explains a lot of what we see at the Capitol with a lot of these anti-LGBTQ plus bills. So, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit, actually a lot of it, about the healthcare ban bill that is slated to go into effect. I hope, if you've been with us, that you are already comfy. You're already in a place where you feel warm and safe and secure. And hopefully you feel the virtual community that's happening in this space. And you feel the love and the appreciation and the passion from the speakers and the presenters that you've heard from so far. We certainly do not do this for the money. We do it because we love our people, which is why we're spending a Monday night chatting with you about this stuff. So we have a video that Dr. Clifton Mixon did for us that just kind of goes through the bill. And so he's just going to kind of give us some more information about it, because one of the most dangerous things about this work and this bill in particular is that there's just a lot of misinformation and a lot of just unanswered questions going around. And so we want to just kind of try and clear some of that up if we are going to have to be dealing with this. And I see a question. Is there, I'm guessing VOD is video on demand. Is there a VOD for those of us who are joining late? So the answer to that is because it's like streaming on multiple different pages. The idea is that once we're done with the live, it'll still be accessible on all of the different social media pages. So you can go back and view this video if you joined late or if you couldn't join us at all, but you still want the information. So I hope that answers your question. But I think we're ready to go to Dr. Clifton Mixon's video.
Good evening. My name's Dr. Clifton Mixon, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a gay man and a licensed pediatric psychologist from Louisiana, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Stop Harming Our Kids Act, unfortunately. I'm a board member for Forum for Equality, and I'm also a grassroots organizing member of our local coalition. And I was hoping I could start off today, before getting into the bill, about talking about all the wonderful things about gender-affirming care. Some people might be wondering, what is gender-affirming care? I hear the word turned around all the time, and when people talk about surgeries, and it's so much more than that. Gender-affirming care is healthcare that centers a patient's personal experience of their own gender in their healthcare and their healthcare decisions. Gender-affirming care seeks to help a patient affirm their gender identity by facilitating transition across physical, psychological, social, and legal processes. This care involves communication systems that allow for a patient to identify their correct demographic information on forms, and also have it respected by the provider and staff while they're in the clinic. It is helping patients make changes to their appearance through clothing, accessory, or style changes. Gender-affirming care is having a mental health professional who understands the types of traumas experienced by the gender-diverse community and can use that insight to help address the effects of the unique types of discrimination faced. Gender-affirming care is facilitating access to accurate governmental identification and medical documentation. And yes, it also includes medical care that involves the use of medicines or surgical procedures to help a patient transition their physical form to match their embodiment goals. Because this bill focuses on minors, we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about the services that are received by minors. And so we're not going to talk a lot about surgeries, because as those of us who provide this care know, surgeries are provided exceptionally rarely for minors, and in our state, they don't happen, if at all. So what do we talk about when we talk about medical care for kids who are transgender or gender diverse? First of all, we talk about puberty blockers. These are interventions that stop unwanted changes that are going to happen to a youth based off of their chromosomes and hormone levels. These are changes that are hormones that are going to start being released that are going to cause their body to change in a way that might not be consistent with who they know they themselves to be. And so youth who are set to go through a puberty that doesn't feel right often experience intense anxiety and depression, and they benefit from having some more time to wait until they're an age that they can make a more informed decision about which puberty is most accurate. Puberty blockers are relatively safe and irreversible, and when you stop taking puberty blockers, your body will start producing its own natural sex hormones on its own. And so it can be a very temporary intervention for a period of time to give a child the space they need to explore and a family more time to make decisions. In the other group of interventions, we have hormone replacement therapies. And now these are hormone therapies that are actually going to cause new changes that were not otherwise possible based on that patient's genetics and chromosomes and biology. And so this allows a child to have secondary sex changes more consistent with who they know themselves to be. And so this allows them to feel more comfortable in their skin so that they can live their life as their most authentic self. So these interventions have a lot of evidence supporting their effectiveness. We have lots of great research in adults that these medicines work. We also have lots of good research in kids and teenagers. Now, when we look at the progression of how we think about how we support kids and affirm their gender across their lifespan, for children, there are no medicines we consider. And we do see that as we allow kids to socially transition, we see reduced rates of anxiety and depression, and improved psychological well-being and quality of life. As these kids get into puberty, and once they have started puberty and there may be a need for puberty suppression, we may consider that too. And for those who get access to puberty suppression who really need it, we see reduced anxiety and tension. And then as kids start developing and changes start happening, we allow them to start transitioning in a way that fits with their most authentic self. And we see that these kids who felt disconnected from their bodies, who had a really hard time functioning in their day-to-day, start to have changes that allow themselves to feel comfortable in their own skin. And again, we see reduced rates of anxiety and depression. Access to these medications in adolescence is correlated with reduced lifetime suicidality. Getting access to this medicine in your adolescent years also allows teenagers to live their life in a body that feels most comfortable, like a lot of their peers do. We know that this care is safe and necessary for some kids, and it is very effective. This is endorsed by all major medical and mental health organizations: American Medical Association, Academy of Pediatrics, American Psychological and Psychiatric Association, and many, many, many more. You can't really find one that disagrees that is a reputable healthcare organization. And so all the evidence and all the professionals point in this direction, and yet here we are. This didn't start in Louisiana. There has been a nationwide attempt to politicize transgender individuals and gender-affirming care and other aspects of transgender individuals' civil rights. This all started back in 2016, after the codifying of gay marriage. After 2 decades of fighting this out, the focus started to shift. Public opinion had shifted. The country, all in all, started to get to know gay people, started to have family members and loved ones who came out the closet, saw who they are, saw their hearts, saw that they were just like the rest of us and deserved to be married. So the wedge issue that had been used for 2 decades to try and win elections is gone. And so we find a smaller community that fewer people know, that they might not have enough information, and we can confuse them. Because if they don't know someone who's transgender, we can spread lies and we can fabricate crises. They convince you that there's a threat. And it's easier for you to believe because you don't actually know anyone who's transgender to help dispel that myth. And they have been very successful with this strategy. And so here we are with bills targeting gender-affirming care starting in 2020. We have had this proliferation of bills trying to make this a wedge issue, and 2023 has been a really bad year. We have seen around 22 plus states pass this legislation over the past 3 years, and more potentially coming. So they do this ignoring all the facts. Our state, Louisiana Department of Health, to try to help them out, and they did a very good, rigorous report where they looked through the established scientific research. They looked through Louisiana data and looked at what care is being provided to who, how many people, how much money is spent. And what they found is a lot of what is being said by this bill's proponents just isn't true. Gender-affirming medical care for youth is safe and effective when followed using the established standards of care. The same medicines are FDA approved and used safely with cisgender youth. access to gender-affirming medications for youth reduces anxiety and depression and improves quality of life. And we don't see some explosion of lots of kids getting access to this medication. In fact, all they could find in the entire great state of Louisiana on Medicaid is 52 kids who receive this medicine. And so we have this manufacturer crisis. We have all of the energy behind making this a big issue in 2023. And unfortunately, even though this bill has been introduced the past 2 years, this year it finally moved. So this bill was introduced and pre-filed by the bill's author, Representative Gabe Furman, on March 31st. She's done every year, which is coincidentally, probably not coincidentally, Transgender Day of Visibility. He filed his bill and it sat for a while, and then in May, it started to move and we got really scared. It has moved pretty swiftly. We mounted our main defense in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. We knew we had the best chance there and we won. The LGBT Louisianans said that we don't want that passed in our state, and we convinced our committee to kill it. It should have been done. And unfortunately, we don't play by the rules in Louisiana legislature anymore. And we suspended the rules to recommit the bill to a committee that was a sham committee where we know it would pass. And the bill basically sailed through the rest of the process with lots of unfortunate, inappropriate legal maneuvers being used to keep moving the bill faster and faster so they could meet the deadline. And so through a very dramatic and courageous veto by John Bell Edwards, in which he delivered a blistering several-page commentary on why this bill is not necessary or appropriate. I quote, "This is called the Stop Harming Our Kids Act," and it is ironic because that's exactly what it does, is harm our kids. So what is this in a dramatic veto override session? We saw on day one, the veto was overridden. And so here we are. The bill, as it stands, is going to into effect, and let's talk about what it does. So what does this bill impact? It prevents medical providers from prescribing or administering puberty blockers or hormone replacement therapies or the performance of any gender-affirming surgeries. And who is this for? This is specifically for transgender and non-binary minors. They target minors who believe that their gender identity might be different than their sex assigned at birth. So this is anyone under 18, and this is anyone under 18 who has not been emancipated. There are notable exceptions that we don't necessarily agree with, such as still allowing surgeries on intersex minors. There's also an exception for an emergency situation where someone is having a medical emergency from receiving gender-affirming care. The other target beyond transgender teenagers and children and their families are their providers, and that any provider prescribing this medicine who works would lose their license for at minimum the next 2 years, if not fully, and would be subject to a lawsuit until the patient is 30 years old, without any injury proven in the lawsuit. Just if you prescribe the medicine, they can claim damages. The timeline is complicated. After December 31st of this year, no new patients may be prescribed hormone replacement therapies that aren't already on these therapies, or puberty blockers. If you are already on these medicines, as of January 1st, 2024, if you do believe as a provider that it would bring significant and unnecessary harm to a patient to just discontinue the medicine, you are allowed to systematically titrate that medicine down for the next 12 months, and the medicine has to be stopped by December 31st of 2024. That means that as of January 1st of 25, no medicines can be refilled for new or existing patients who are receiving this care, meaning all patients will have to receive care out of state. So this isn't good news. What do we do? Our options are limited. For those who are close to 18, I encourage you work with your doctor to ensure that you're able to have enough medication to keep yourself safe and healthy until the patient turns 18. For those that aren't close to 18, a lot of families have left the state or are planning to leave. I'm from Louisiana, and I recognize how hard it is to get us to leave, and so that's a very personal decision. And while I don't want that to happen to anyone, I know that some families feel very strongly that this is what they need to do to keep their kids safe, and that is the priority. Some families have means to access this care through medical tourism, by paying to fly multiple times a year to hospitals and states where this care is safe. Others are not as lucky, and so I look forward to hearing from our colleagues at Southern Equality, who are going to be talking next about some grants that families might be able to access to help them with this travel. Finally, the last strategy we're seeing some families try is considering an emancipation of their minor child. Emancipation is a legal process by which a minor child gains legal custody over themselves and can make decisions as if they're age of majority. A judge has to sign off on it, and the only way that this could work in this situation is if the teenager and parents fill out the application and go to the judge together saying, this is what we think is best for our child. And it is up to the judge to determine whether or not this is a good enough reason for emancipation and whether or not the child has the means to be able to take care of themselves. It can still be with parent support, but as you can imagine, this is going to come down to the personal and political leanings of the judge you go to. This is a legal process, and I'm not a lawyer, so full disclaimer, if you want to consider this approach, please retain your own legal counsel. I'm sorry we're here, and I want to end with a message of hope. There are a lot of us here in the state who aren't going anywhere and are going to stay and fight as long as it takes. This is one point in history, and it is a hard one. And we know things change with time. And there are enough of us in the state to build momentum over time to turn this around. And so if you haven't already, I invite you to come join the fight to restore this care for our kids and protect the future of our queer and trans community in Louisiana. I thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Okay, I am trying really hard not to start crying. Yeah, so two things come to mind before we switch it off to our partners that campaign for Southern Equality. So yeah, like a lot of people who registered for this town hall are parents or you are caregivers um, of people who are under 18 who identify as queer or trans or GNC. So first, I just want to acknowledge like the deep fortitude that it takes to be a supportive parent because number one, we know that that's not the situation for a lot of young people. And here y'all are on this town hall, or maybe you're viewing it at a later date, and you are the exception. So thank you so much for showing up for your kids. And I'll just say, been doing this work for quite a minute now. And I think one of the greatest honors that I've had is building relationships with young queer and trans people and their families. So I just want to again give like so much love and shout outs and affirmations to the families, the parents, the young people who are showing up to this fight day after day and literally year after year, session after session, because I know how hard it feels to, you know, just wonder how you're going to do this, but to know that you don't have any other choice because this is literally your kid and you just want them to feel safe and to be free. So, big shout outs to the families and the parents. And I just want to give a brief intro to Carolyn and our wonderful friends at Campaign for Southern Equality. we've been talking a lot tonight about how this work is state based, how we are doing every single legislative session up in Baton Rouge, trying to be there for queer and trans people. And we know that this is also a regional and national struggle. And so our friends, they're based out of Asheville, but they're still Southern, y'all. And they have literally been here, like just basically being like, what can we do and how can we help? So I'm going to bring up Carolyn to talk a little bit about the resources that are available if you are a family, caregiver, parent of a young person, and you need to make sure that they have the health care that they need. So take it away, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for having us this evening. My name is Carolyn. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program manager for the Southern Trans Youth Emergency Project at CSE, the Campaign for Southern Equality. I'm here to share a little bit more about the Southern Trans Youth Emergency Project, or STIEP, and the resources that we have to help families in Louisiana who have been impacted or will be impacted by the gender affirming care ban. STIUP is a project that is operating all across the South and is supporting families in accessing continued health care after this hateful legislature put restrictions and bans on gender affirming care for minors. We offer grants of $500 to impacted families in order to help them continue to access care, as well as help folks find care and find options for care in states where bans have not passed. The first thing I should say is that it is just so unfair and unjust and just screwed up, for lack of a better word, that you might have to leave Louisiana to access healthcare for your child. But we are here to help you find an option that works, even if it's not the option that I would choose for you all, which would be having a doctor right next door that could get you all the care that you need. We have lists of providers and clinics that are able to take folks from out of state. We have ways to help you get to places out of state. We have options that might fit specifically for your family situation. If you have family in a city somewhere across the country, if you take anything kind of away from what I'm saying, it's just that there are options, and we will work together to figure out a way to get your kid the health care that they need and that they deserve. That is what we're here for, and we'll help you figure it out. So if you in your family or someone that you know is in need of support in figuring out next steps, whatever that looks like, whether that be figuring somewhere to start after January or somewhere to start now if your provider has cut care now, please reach out to our team. Our website is southernequality.org/LA resources for Louisiana. Reach out there and I'll be in contact. We'll schedule a call. We'll talk through your specific situation. We'll get you a grant if that would be helpful, and we'll find you a provider that'll be able to get your kid in as quickly as possible. I know this can all feel very hopeless, but we are here to help. You're not in this alone. There are so many people that are going through the same thing all across the South, and we'll get through this tough chapter together, and we'll figure out a way. As I keep saying, we'll figure out a way to get your kid the health care they deserve. So I'll be on the Q&A if you have any questions, but we're here to help, and I hope that you'll reach out. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So still talking about this very, very horrid ban. And I think the thing that I'm just like thinking about is how healthcare is such an intensely personal decision. And so the fact that like we're even having to take time to like talk about this in such a public virtual way is actually kind of wild when you think about it. But we want to make sure that, like I said, like Carolyn, Dr. Mixon has said so beautifully, that we are making sure that we're supporting each other through what is a really difficult time where there's a lot of questions, more questions than answers. So we're just trying to do what we can to really wrap our arms around our community and especially our kids. So with that in mind, there are a couple of more resources that we have for y'all. So in addition to the resources from Southern Equality, which, like Carolyn said, they're state specific Louisiana specific information there for families and caregivers and parents that need that. We also have a provider list that has been around for a while, but we're lifting it up again because Louisiana Trans Advocates, they have just been out here doing the work for a minute. So this resource provider list has been around for a minute, but we're lifting it up again, so that you can have that. So a link should be appearing to the provider list soon. And we also have a third resource. So, also housed on Louisiana Trans Advocates website is a healthcare ban FAQ type document. Um, we have this really amazing video from Dr. Mixon, but we know that folks process information in a lot of different ways. So if you had trouble sitting through the video, then you can also go to this FAQ document and just hopefully get some answers about the bill and the different resources that are out there, what's criminalized under the bill, and what is still legal so that you can make the best choice for yourself. So, those are three resources that we have available for you tonight. That was a lot of information that we powered through in like an hour, y'all. So that was a lot. If you're still hanging with us, thank you so much. What questions do you have? Like, literally, there are no more speakers to hear from. Like, literally, it's just questions now. So, what questions do you have? Feel free to comment them on whatever page you are viewing from. If you also have comments, affirmations, positive thoughts, you know, if you just have some energy that you want to give, like, feel free to also leave that for us too, y'all, because this is hard. So yeah, and also just one more reminder that if you do have a question that you want to ask, but you don't want your name to be publicly listed in this video, you can email hello@forumforequality.org, and we will look at it, we'll answer it, but we won't reveal the identity of the person who asked it. So yeah, just come on through. Or maybe don't come on through and we can just like leave early so we can still catch some of the Saints game. I don't know what y'all like to do. Yeah, so I'm seeing some comments from Facebook. Amazing content. Thank you. We also have thank you for doing what you do. Yes. Thank you for coming and spending a Monday with us. Good question from Colleen. Is mental health support or mental health care affected in any way by the bills? So, as far as I know, mental health care is still covered and protected, even with the healthcare ban being in effect. So, counseling, therapy, mental health care, that type of care is still going to be okay. Okay, we got a lot rolling in. All right. Okay, more thank yous. Can you please resend the link for the FAQ? Yes, somebody did repost it. Thank you for that. Yeah. Does anybody, any of the speakers that are still on, do y'all have any comments on Colleen's question if mental health care is going to be okay even while the ban is in effect.
Yeah, I can. Yes, there are no provisions on the bill that talk about mental health care, so everything should be able to continue without any problem.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Um, got a very big question. What does the governor's race mean for the next legislative session? Okay, so if you have not heard, Louisiana does have a governor's election coming up, which now is a really good time to plug this. I think we do at the ACLU, we have a voting while trans information center on our website. So we know that in Louisiana, there's just a lot of laws that have to do with voting and ID documents. And for reasons that I don't think I need to go into, um, getting documents that accurately reflect your identity, there's a lot of barriers to getting those documents updated. And so realizing that that's a barrier for queer and trans people, and that we have a lot of voting ID laws in the state. That's how we came up with the Voting While Trans Center. So please take advantage of that if that's something that you can use. Also, want to plug before I actually answer the question that September 23rd is the deadline to register online to vote in Louisiana. So if you are not registered to vote, you can do it online up until September 23rd. And doing it by that date will allow you to vote in both the October and November elections, because there's two this year, y'all. October and November. So please vote in both. Please remember to do that. But actually getting to the question about what does the governor's race mean, I think it would be important to kind of just talk about what was made possible with the current administration. At the beginning, we did go through some of the wins that we've had as a coalition. And if you were, kind of following legislative session this year, you know that Governor Edwards vetoed the healthcare ban. And so that's one of the strongest tools that a governor has. If there's a bill coming from the legislature that just is not right, that they don't agree with, or whatever reason, they can just veto it. Now, of course, the legislature can go back and override the governor's veto, but that historically has been something that's been really kind of hard to do. And also, too, depending on the administration that's in place, just to be frank, a lot of folks in our coalition, because of the relationships we have with the governor's office, that has a tremendous impact on the bills that we're either trying to defeat or we're trying to get them passed during session. So, in short, literally huge implications. Who's in the governor's mansion? It has a big impact on the type of bills and the type of climate that we're working in here in this state. Another thing I also want to add to is that in addition to the governor's race this year, every single House seat, state House seat, and state Senate seat is going to be on the ballot. So if you are upset with some of these bill sponsors for bringing some of these bills, or if you really like some of the bill sponsors who brought some really good bills, then show your praise or show your disgust at the ballot box if you can. So let me go to some of these other questions. Okay, Catherine wants to know, has anything been proposed in place of gender affirming care? Will mental health or other types of care be provided or offered? How are legislators proposing to support these youth? I think I know the answer already, but I'm trying to be optimistic. So I'm really glad you asked that question. So one of the things that we heard supporters of the healthcare ban say is that, oh, well, we've got access to mental health care. If kids are going through these types of struggles, then they don't need surgeries or blockers or hormone therapy. They just need a counselor or a mental health professional. So that is what they said. And my response to that is that there was a survey done a couple of years ago by Glisten, which is an organization that supports LGBTQ plus students. And they said that students in Louisiana, over half of them who identified as queer and or trans, said that they had difficulty getting in touch with a counselor or a therapist. So the thing that our opposition is saying should work, no one can actually really access. So that's just my response to that. Any other speakers or presenters? Do you got anything else to add on this question or the governor's race question?
Hey, Anaya. Hey, everybody. I've had a wardrobe change since you saw me last. The other hat that I wear outside of HIV decriminalization is I've worked in trans health in the state of Louisiana since 2011, and like worked very closely with one of the largest clinics that offer gender affirming care. And right now, most recently, I've done a training series with LSU to try and train behavioral health providers how to offer gender affirming care better. But what I want to tell y'all is that as someone who has like recently made it kind of like my entire career to train providers how to do this work better, the existing landscape in Louisiana is really bad. And if anyone who, all y'all gender diverse people out there, my community, I feel you. Trying to access my own care is brutal when I'm literally out here like trying to train people how to do it better. Clinicians oftentimes want to do it better, but when they hit political barriers like this, where it becomes a little more complicated than it was before there wasn't legislation, they get really nervous. So we start talking about like, does this affect behavioral health providers? Well, maybe not explicitly, but I am working directly with behavioral health providers throughout the state who are like, but what about the law? So people have a lot of misunderstanding about it. And that's part of the point of the law itself. So that's why we need to be really well educated about what these things do and don't mean, because it is very likely, dear trans person on the other side of this camera, that you're already educating your providers about what you need and what your body needs. And that's going to be true for behavioral health too. When people say, sorry, I can't offer that, we need to be educating our young people to know that, yes, they can, to the point where they have to stop. So that's not a replacement, but it's a way of, I think, empowering each other as patients in clinical settings, which I'm all here for. Y'all who know me, I know this. Like, we need to be supporting each other and building power, because that's what's going to change this legislation eventually. Like, these kids who don't have access right now are going to be able to vote in a minute too. We're going to need them at the polls too. Like, this is a moment for community activation. My dog's upset right now. You can hear her like getting hyped in the background, but I'm going to get off camera, but that's what I wanted to offer next to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to add on that they write these things in a confusing way to confuse us on purpose. But I do want to say with just 100% certainty that mental health care should not be impacted by this law. Behavioral health care should not be impacted by this law. If you are getting turned away from either of those two things, please reach out to either CSE or the ACLU, and we'll help figure out why that's happening. But you should be able to continue your care in mental health care. There should be no interruption on that. I just want to make sure we're very, very clear about that point. And if you're having any problems with that, to reach out to us or any of the other partners here as well.
Yes, thank you so much, both Deets and Carolyn, for coming through with the knowledge. So David wants to know, what are some ways people can get involved in doing this work? Thank you, David, for asking that question. So there are a couple of different ways. I'm also really hoping that the speakers and presenters can hop on to answer this question. So first off, you're going to be getting, well, the people who registered, you're going to be getting a follow-up email, and we can also figure out how to post links on the different social media pages that we're on. That includes links to all of these resources. So please help us by sharing these resources with people, families, young people that you know will need it. That's one way. Like I just said, if you can, please show your praise or disgust at the ballot box. Oh my God, I cannot say it enough. Um, and also, too, if you are someone who has some sort of financial privilege, please also think about donating to the different organizations that are a part of LocALL. You are on some of their pages right now, as well as to Campaign for Southern Equality, because it's donations from people that enable them to give grants to families that need to travel so that their kids can get health care. So if that's you, think about that. But those are just some of the ways that I can think of. And you already know, legislative session 2024, baby, LocALL will be there with the quickness to like guide you through sessions, to keep you informed, because we know it's a lot. But yeah, be on the lookout for that, like in early 2024. But for now, those are some of the things that you can do. Any more speakers or presenters want to pop in and answer that question? Okay, cool beans. So I'm not seeing any more questions from either the Forum for Equality address or on any of the social media pages. So I think we can wrap up. Thank you so much, y'all, for spending an hour and 20 minutes of your Monday evening with us on what I'm sure what was already a very full and packed day for you. As a reminder, just want to list out the resources just one more time. So Campaign for Southern Equality, they have a whole webpage with Louisiana specific information. We also have the healthcare ban FAQ document in case you just need quick answers to some of the questions that you have about the ban. If you also just want to learn more about the legislative process overall, because that's literally how we got to deal with all of these bills. If you want to just know what that process looks like, how it works, Louisiana Trans Advocates has a legislative toolbox, and ACLU of Louisiana, we have a handbook as well. And also, y'all, we've got the Voting While Trans information webpage. The deadline to register to vote online in Louisiana is September 23rd. Election day is October 14th. And then the next one is November 18th. Everything's on the ballot, y'all. So, yes, we posted all the links. Thank y'all so much for being with us. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your night. Bye, y'all.